So there seems to be a lot of confusion as to why we are not saving US citizens in Sudan. And in this video, I pretty much want to show you guys what it would take to save US citizens and how if all of a sudden we do a massive rescue effort in Sudan, we could quite literally cause a massive outbreak and conflict, and then we can get sucked into a Sudan conflict in Africa, and we don't want that. First things first, Sudan is massive. So we don't know where all of these US citizens are. They can be spread out throughout all corners of Sudan. And the State Department or the government, it's not that they don't have the right to know where you are. They just don't know where you are, because when people go to a country, I don't tell them, hey, I'm at my grandma's house on 31st Street in whatever Sudan. That's not what happens. Something else I want to point out, a lot of people seem to be comparing the evacuation of Afghanistan to Sudan, and that is just not the case. One thing we have to realize that in Afghanistan, we had a military footprint, and that is really important because having a military footprint in a country, even though the evacuation, some people say it was a success, some people say it was bad, having a military footprint allowed us to be able to evacuate the people we wanted to evacuate, but also to defend American assets. Now, I have some visual representations for you guys because I love these things, and we're going to do this live, so might be a little flukes here and there. One thing you need to understand is that we have no military footprint in Khartoum, Sudan. No military footprint. So then imagine all of a sudden, let me make myself smaller here, all of a sudden we're like, okay, we're going to save everybody, make room for our cargo jets, make room for our military, make room for some helicopters, make room for some government officials. Sudan is not a country that can allow for such things to happen where we're just taking up real estate because they depend on airports to get assets into their country or whatever they need. So then imagine all of a sudden the United States is like, okay, we're the US military, move out of the way. And not only that, now we're going to create gates and openings for people to come on in. And we'll get into that in a second. But understand this. Even if we wanted to fly in all of these assets, oops, sorry. Let me get this guy over here. That's our CIA agent. Even if we wanted to fly in all of our assets, we would either have to come from Djibouti, which quite a distance away, or we'd have to come in all the way from Italy because we have an airborne asset there. And if there's one unit or US military unit who's all about airport operations, that'd be the 82nd Airborne, or in Italy, it's the 173rd Airborne. Or the next option would be, hey, you know what? Maybe from Djibouti, we can bring in some ground assets, troop carriers, whatever it takes. Let's bring in all these ground assets and maybe we can, go save some people. And I don't even know if they have the resources to do that out of Djibouti because then they'd have to clear their own lanes. Now, quick history lesson. Back in 2003 Iraq War, there was something out there called the Thunder Run. And pretty much this was an operation to help clear out lanes to get to the airport in Iraq. Baghdad, Iraq. And it was very, very tense and pretty much not deadly, but quite the operation. A lot of firefights went down. It's a very famous operation. Look up Thunder Run, Iraq War. And so the last thing that we want is for us to go, let me get back to for us to go to Khartoum, we show up, and then all of a sudden we're like, okay, let's start a Thunder Run. I don't think people realize the implications of what that means. So let's say all of a sudden, okay, we have all of our assets here. Now we got to go and find these people and create these lanes. Because not only do we have to create a lane within Sudan, but we also have to go to the port of Sudan. So now we have ground assets, military personnel, air assets, government officials. We still don't know where these people are. Now we need to bring naval assets to the port of Sudan. We're taking up real estate in a country, again, that just can't be doing that. Just because the US military got out of there, or the US government, why is that Sudan's problem? So now imagine we bring in a massive vessel. We're taking up port space. Again, they need those resources to come into the country, but nope, we're there. And now we got to bring the boat all the way back down to Djibouti. And then not only that, from Djibouti, we got to fly the Americans now wherever they need to go. So there's a lot of sequences here that needs to happen. And I don't think many people understand that it's not that we can't do that. It's that if all of a sudden we start bringing more and more and more assets, we start flying into a country, they see helicopters flying everywhere, that is not a good look for the United States. And the United States already had said, look, this didn't just happen overnight. There was prior warning from the State Department, about 3 weeks of warning to let Americans know, look, things are not looking good. And you might want to get out of this country. And look, I am not here saying we shouldn't save Americans and it's not our obligation to provide a way to protect Americans. But I wanted to give you guys a visual representation of what happens when you start adding more and more and more assets. Because the last thing we want is a thunder run in Sudan or helicopters flying over, and then all of a sudden you have rebel groups who are like, hey, you know what? Let's just mess with the Americans. Let's see what happens. You know, that would be a great... Who knows what could happen? Stuff like that happened in the Iraq War, happened in the Afghanistan War, collateral damage happened, and then we get sucked into mini conflicts within countries. And again, I'm not saying that the United States couldn't do this. What I'm saying is it'll be a very difficult task logistics-wise. I don't see how we are going to get the vehicles over into Sudan. Where are we going to park them? Like, are we going to go to Khartoum, and then from there we're going to create these lanes with buses, go save people? This is not the Afghanistan evacuation or the pullout. Another big difference is, besides the fact that we had military assets in Afghanistan, understand that U.S. Americans or U.S. entities were being targeted in Afghanistan. That's just not the case right now in Sudan. I'm not going to sit here and say Americans can walk around freely, but compared to Afghanistan, people were quite literally being stopped, whether you were an interpreter or whether you had worked with the U.S. military or assets before. They were being stopped, put in prison, being taken out. It was not a good thing. So during the Afghanistan war, we were hardly able to leave our little protected bubble and create these lanes. And if we had to do that, that would have been a very dangerous situation as well. And I really don't see where we can do a thunder run or some sort of safety rescue in Sudan. I'm not seeing this being anywhere near comparable to the Afghanistan evacuation. Again, I'm not saying we can't do this, and I'm not necessarily saying we shouldn't do this, but it takes a lot of moving pieces, and there's a lot of high risk. Now, if all of a sudden, like, Sudan starts to really pop off, that's when I think, you know, we might have some issues here. If Americans are being targeted, without a doubt, we would come right into Khartoum and just start taking it over if we had to. But again, that would cause some more issues. So I just wanted to give you guys this visual representation of what the implications are if we bring in all of these U.S. assets, flying over your country, taking up real estate space. It's not that simple. And I think the U.S. military unfortunately learned the hard way in Afghanistan that evacuations are hard. There's a lot of moving pieces. And then we just never know if we got to make sure the right people are even coming on board through our jets, our buses. Like, government agents will have to be there. That was another big issue that was going on during the Afghanistan evacuation. We didn't even know if we had the right people coming on the jets. So, yeah. Let me know what you guys leave in the comments down below or your opinions. But this is the way I see it. I don't see it necessarily as like the biggest threat to citizens in Sudan, but going into a war-torn country like Sudan, you always run into the threat of something might happen in a country where a government might destabilize, and it's not like this happened overnight. There were warning signs, and unfortunately, you take that risk when you go somewhere. So I hope all the Americans are okay who are there, and for the people who do want to get out, it seems like only nonprofits are the only answer. It doesn't look like the United States is going to bring in like this contingency group of special forces or airborne troops, because even if they wanted to, they'd have to somehow create a relay point to go and get you. And I don't know how they're going to do that. So that's where we're at right now with the Sudan evacuation, or non-evacuation, if you will. And I'm going to keep monitoring the situation. Hopefully nothing comes out of this, and hopefully everything just settles down. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you later.